Well, joining us now with a deeper dive on the president's economic push is Victoria Churchill. She's a spokesperson for Young Voices and a reporter with the Daily Mail.
Victoria, welcome. Always good to see you. So the president, he's criticized the word affordability and calls it a democratic scam. But the fact that he's talking about it seems to show that he does understand it's something a lot of people are talking about and feeling. What's your read, Victoria, on how Americans are feeling about this issue?
Well, I think that the president is right to focus on this, and I think that he was incorrect. I think it was a rare messaging misstep from him. I believe it was last week or maybe the week before with Thanksgiving, where he said that it was all a Democrat scam, because he has also in the past called himself the affordability president, and so I don't think that you can kind of have both sides of the coin, saying that this is both a false narrative, but also doing your best to message on it. I do think that the president has made great strides with affordability. I think he was talking to Politico in an interview that I believe just dropped earlier today, where of course he was talking about things like gas prices. I'm somebody that's traveled all across the country, particularly covering campaigns, particularly in Pennsylvania, where the president is going to be later tonight. And, I know that this is something that folks have been concerned about. Last year's election, which I covered, quite extensively in swing states, it was all about putting food on the table. It was all about economic prosperity, and it was all about making sure that Americans can succeed economically. And so, I think the president knows that, and I think that's why he's continuing to message on this.
You talked about the messaging with it being a misstep. In some ways, it seems muddled from going to a con job to a scam to now doing this rally. Do you believe the president can turn his numbers around with rallies like this one tonight, where he's touting the strength of the economy?
I think both Democrats and Republicans know that Trump is at his best when he is in campaign mode. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles was on a podcast that I saw yesterday. I'm not quite sure if it was filmed earlier in the week or not, but I believe it was with Moms for America. And, she was talking about how she sees her role in the White House as actually, in terms of the campaign, talking about putting the president on the ballot, which historically the president, of course, is not on the ballot during the midterms. And, this was kind of a debate in last week's election, of course, with Tennessee. Democrats tried their best to put Trump on the ballot in a negative way. And the Republican, in his speech where he was accepting his win, Matt Van Epps, who is now the new representative for Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, he said, this is how we win. We have to run with Donald Trump because, in his case and in others that are going to be running in the midterms, these people will still be serving to, at least as Republicans, try and enact a Trump agenda. The White House is going to be doing everything in the midterms to make sure that Trump is not a lame duck president after the midterms, as typically happens with administrations. And, I think the president's journey, particularly to Pennsylvania, which is the swing state of all swing states, we're going to be talking, of course, throughout all of next year about what states the House majority that's currently quite razor thin, what states that House majority is going to run through. And Pennsylvania is definitely on the short list. They had 3 seats that were very closely watched last year during the 2024 elections, and I think it will be that number, if not more, during next year's midterms in 2026.
Yeah, and I think in that same interview you mentioned, Susie Wiles had said that Donald Trump would be out campaigning in the midterms like it was 2024. Victoria, meanwhile, an upcoming Senate vote on extending Obamacare subsidies is expected to fail because it doesn't include the Republican reforms. How important, Victoria, will it be for Congress to get something done on health care, particularly as we look at the midterms?
I think this is something that a lot of Americans are watching. Of course, during the Democrat shutdown that lasted, historic lengths, Democrats were talking particularly about the need to reform the Affordable Care Act. They did not end up getting anything healthcare wise in the rerun of the Affordable Care Act. And so that was kind of the compromise that Republicans came to, was guaranteeing Democrats a vote on the package that they want. Now, it is important to note that Senate Health, which is the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, Senator from Louisiana, Bill Cassidy, he has introduced his own legislation. He introduced it yesterday, the bill text. Of course, it's quite complicated, but it has elements, at least from what I've seen, of a more kind of free market plan. And that's also important to note because that is something that folks potentially like a Senator Rand Paul could agree to. President Trump shared a text with Senator Rand Paul last week where, Paul was like, I know we've kind of had some issues, but here's my idea on healthcare, kind of what do you think? And, the president kind of took that and ran with that and saying, if I can make deals with Rand Paul, who tends to, attack me at times, even though he's a member of my own party, I can probably make deals with anyone. So it'll be interesting to see what the president comes up with. I know Senator Cassidy has had some proposals that the White House and the rest of the administration seem keen on. But of course, it all comes back to, kind of backroom deals that are going to be being made here on Capitol Hill as to what actually gets a vote.
All right, Victoria Churchill of Young Voices, thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight. We know you're awfully busy covering Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Victoria.